What sometimes gets overlooked, and particularly this time around, because the sort of the most exciting, I think, of the governor's races did not either come to fruition or come to fruition on election eve. I'm talking about Beto O'Rourke. He's running obviously for the Senate, but also Stacey Abrams, who's going to a runoff, and Andrew Gillum, who looks by all accounts to be involved in a recount. But those rarely change their outcomes. But Democrats picked up 7 governor houses and some major ones: Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, never mind Colorado, Kansas, New Mexico, and Maine. But it's interesting, Democrats did quite well in those states that Donald Trump, there was so many but-fors as to why Hillary Clinton didn't win and Donald Trump did. But certainly, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania are closely associated with that dynamic. And yet, in Wisconsin and in Michigan, also Illinois, we saw a Democratic flip. We didn't see that in Ohio. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, really, that's just a reversion to the status quo that had been there before, right? Before Clinton. It may have just been her. I mean, maybe these states, just for whatever reason, and it's not like Trump won them by large margins. He didn't. There was a very
less
slim
than
victory.
About 10,000 in Michigan and Wisconsin. I mean,
yeah, I mean,
less.
this was just. Yeah, I mean, we don't even, and of course, we don't need to replay all the varying scenarios. There were a lot of reasons why, potentially, that she wasn't able to get those over the line. I mean, obviously, we'd be living in a different world today if she had. But I don't find that surprising. I mean, I really don't think that Donald Trump, there are a lot of people on both the left and the right who think that Donald Trump came along and really spoke to these people, and they really, it's true that there are a lot of people, red Americans, who love Donald Trump. But, that wasn't the reason in those states. Those victories were so narrow that wasn't really what was happening there. It was just we were seeing a division. I think people at this point, probably a few of those, maybe they thought Trump was, putting on an act and he, was going to sober up when he became president. And 10,000 of them realized that isn't true. And went back the other way. I mean, whatever. But, those were never going to be, I never felt like those were solid, Republican states going forward, and the Democrats had lost the Midwest forever. I mean, it just never made much sense. And I think last night sort of validated that view. And it's a big problem for Trump. I mean, it's huge, right? I mean, if he did, that was his electoral college win, he made that path. And Florida too, by the way. But Florida's Florida, and you never know with there. But had there been a couple of districts won in Florida, Clinton would have won the electoral college too. So there are these places where there were these narrow victories that Trump pulled out. That if he's unable to do it in 2020, that's it for him. So those are all things that I think are just sort of reverting to a different time, whether it was anti-Clinton or pro-Trump or whatever. It was a very small, tiny moment in time that made that happen. So, I'm not surprised about it. What I am kind of excited about, though, is that in a lot of these places, I mean, like North Carolina turned 16, they flipped 16 seats in their state House and Senate. Texas, 14 seats went blue. Pennsylvania, the Democrats won 19 seats. 350 seats by Wednesday morning, they were reporting had flipped. That's a big deal because during the Obama years, the Democrats were just absolutely decimated in these state houses. And as you point out, that's where all the action is with the redistricting and voting rights and all this stuff that will make it possible for Democrats to maybe, not have such a headwind going forward. So that's really a good sign. And if it happens in places like Texas, Beto O'Rourke may not have been able to pull, to get over the line. He came very, very close. But he apparently may have pulled in 2 to 3 House seats. And then, as you pointed out, in Houston, he turned over the whole local
Right.
judiciary, and they're progressives, and they're African Americans, and they're women. I mean, this was an amazing sort of thing to happen. So there's some kind of churning at the lower level that really shows, and I think you'll agree with me, Sam. This is about the Democrats finally getting down to organizing on a grassroots basis, getting out of this sort of, elite consultant business and talking about TV ads and the big message and all the rest of it, and just getting their hands dirty down on a local level. And it really helps if a place like Texas has a exciting, charismatic candidate that can kind of gather people. But that was happening even before O'Rourke took off. I mean, these people were down there organizing in their communities, and that's what's going to stand. That we're seeing the results starting to happen in the Democratic Party because of that much activism and organization, and that really is a good sign. I think.
I agree with you totally, and I don't think that the story about what this says about Donald Trump's 2020 prospects is getting out there enough. Now, look, I don't want to oversell this for obvious reasons, right? I mean, we've been down this road, but the fact is that there is no indication that Donald Trump is in a position to pick up a state that he didn't win in 2020. Right, mm-hmm. These states, his numbers, even in the states that are pro-Trump, are not particularly good. But the numbers in the states that are not pro-Trump, I mean, it falls off a cliff for him, right? And so you're not going to see states move into his column. So he has to retain those states that he did get in 2016. And this election shows that in those states, it may have saved someone like, I don't know, Marsha Blackburn, let's say, in Tennessee, to have Donald Trump visit and be that closely associated with him. But in purple and blue states, that association super, super toxic for those. And the implication is that these are not states come 2020 that he can count on as electing him because, we said many times it was a perfect storm. Well, perfect storms don't come by that often, at least theoretical. So, I think people should take some measure of encouragement of that from these races as well. All right, look, we have to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about the referendums that we saw and what happened in New York and frankly in California as well. New York has, as does California, sort of an outsized influence on the rest of the country because of the size of their economies. And so what happens in New York or what happens in California doesn't necessarily stay there. We got to take a quick break. I'm Sam Seder. I'm talking to the great Digby. We'll be right back on Ring of Fire Radio.